Okay, welcome to not the Dragon Shed for another soap of the month. This one I'm calling Coffee Break, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm probably going to tell you this at some point as I go along anyway, but just to clarify what I've got my oils here and they're down to about 28 degrees. I've got my lye here, which is made a 1-to-1 ratio with water. So I've got 112 grams of lye with 112 grams of water, so it's a super caustic lye, so being very careful with that one. And here I've got the rest of the water plus a splash in coffee. This is an organic fair trade coffee. The original plan was to make this as a milk soap, and I actually made up kind of a latte, kind of milky coffee, and froze it, but somebody had an iced coffee last night and they used my ice cubes, so I don't have time to do another lot, so I've just made some fresh coffee and I'm going to do it as a completely liquid mix this time. So this is my milk soap recipe, but it works either way. So I've got my fragrance oil here, which is cafe latte, and I've got slightly more than I usually use because I'm doing 4 layers. So I'm going to move these over here so I don't end up knocking them over. And into each of my other containers here I've got graduated amounts of colourant. So this is some kaolin clay, that's just pure kaolin clay. Next one down is coffee mica with kaolin. Next one down is brown mica, coffee mica and a little bit of kaolin. And then the bottom one is just brown mica. So I'm doing this, as I said, I'm doing layers, but I still want a bar or 2 bars for my little set. So what I've got here is some cardboard that I've just cut to fit like that and covered in tape. Now these should slide nicely and fairly tightly into the mould. Now these aren't really ideal for long-term contact with soap, but hopefully I will do what I need to do quite quickly, so that shouldn't be a problem. The tape on the outside will stop the soap from kind of soaking into the card and help to keep a fairly clean line. So I've got 3 bits of card per bar here, so that's going to give me my 4 layers. That's the plan. The rest of it I'm going to actually just put into the loaf mould, so I'll just very carefully layer those in. So I think that's all my prep done. One thing I need to keep in mind is that my bowl on its own empty weighs 700 grams, so I need to remember that for the next stage. So I'm ready for my lye and my stick blender. And everything else. So this is, as I said, super concentrated lye, is 1-to-1 with water. I mean, you could just make soap like this, doing a 1-to-1 mix. That will make a standard soap anyway, and you wouldn't need to wait so long for it to cure. But it would accelerate extremely. I'm expecting this to accelerate a little bit anyway because the coffee will cause some sort of reaction. So adding in the coffee and the lye, and I'm going to start off short bursts just until I've kind of brought down the caustic nature of the lye. I think just mixing it in the bottom with the coffee should dilute the caustic nature. Well, that's an idea anyway. Good, I'm not scraping in between. I'm just going to be adding more mica to each layer anyway. So I'm going to very carefully pour a wee smidge into the first section of my mould here, and make sure my little barriers are pushed right the way down. Leaking a little bit. Oh, you're leaking a lot. Okay, that failed. Okay. So much for that idea, I'll do it in layers then. I'll do it layers this way instead. So I just want a thin layer on the bottom. It was a good plan, but it didn't work. And the rest I'm dropping as a thin layer in my loaf mould. Oops, try not to get it up the sides. Okay. I think I'll scrape this a little bit. Let's get the rest of the dark out. Okay. So this one I'm just going to take a spoon and just kind of float it very gently. Actually, that's working quite well. I'm tempted to tap that down, but I don't really want to settle it too much. So I'll let it just sit like that. And for this, I'll pour this over the back of my spoon. It should ease off on the drop slightly. I'm sure it can make that much of a difference because the coffee itself is going to colour it. Okay, so take the spoon again, I think, and just light spoon of layers. You can see the, oh, you can see from this angle, probably not. Hang on, if I just change the angle. See the two layers have started to kind of set a little bit, so this is standing up, which is good. So I'm not getting the vertical layers like I wanted. Oh no, I'm getting horizontal layers like I wanted, but it isn't too bad, I think, for horizontal ones. So I'll just move you back over. I'm going to do the same again. I'll pour this over the top of my spoon, kind of break the fall. You can feel the heat coming off the loaf already. It's a little alarming. I know coffee does accelerate slightly, but there's quite a lot of acceleration. Okay, so my brown jug. Now we're going to go on to the white layer. I might need to add a bit more kale in here. There we go. Let's see how white this goes. It's going to get a little whiter as it saponifies, as it sets anyway. Might just need to add a bit more. Okay. fragrance. I'll give this a good scraping before I start to get the rest of it in there. That's not a bad colour. I think I could probably do some more. A heaping teaspoon there. Kaolin as a whitener isn't really ideal. You want something like titanium dioxide for that. But I want it to be useful in the soap, and clay adds a nice kind of feel and slip, and it's good for your skin, so double benefits. I think that's probably as good as I'm going to get that. So like I said, without adding titanium dioxide, you're never going to get pure white. And I think if you want it to look like coffee, make it look like coffee. So I'll keep it muddy. So there's that, and I want another spoon. So I'm going to do the same again. So just spoon on the first or top layer. Make sure this mould is properly filled. So I had an issue with the Canadian one, with all the faffing about that I did, all the moulding and modelling. It wasn't full, it was a kind of a 2/3 of a soap. At least this one was. So make sure if you're moulding into a shape, make sure you fill your shape. That's what I'm saying. Don't be stingy. Although I have noticed that there are a fair amount of brown soaps this year. Got a couple that have got some colours in, but not a lot. So I've got to do something about that. I think I will do in the next one I do. So that I'll just push over there. And same again, pouring over my spoon. Okay. Yeah, I'll give you a scrape around. Okay, like that, and I'm going to top it off with a little bit of coffee. Well, this looks somewhat like a proper coffee cappuccino effect, at least. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of ground coffee just on the top. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I'm quite particular about how I clean things after soaping. Now you can see I'm just wiping out the majority of any kind of leftovers of soap and of oil with kitchen towel. Basically because I don't want this going down the drain. Because oils in the pipes are not good generally. And half saponified stuff in the pipes definitely not good. So I take off as much as I can with the kitchen towel and then wash it in super hand hot water, and then it goes in the dishwasher. So ultimate washing process goes on. So it may seem a little bit extreme, but these utensils aren't separated out, aren't differentiated. So these are also used for food. So one, I don't want to be poisoning or causing problems for my family. And two, I do not want to be causing problems for our drains. So kitchen roll picks up any excess you've got left. You'll always end up with a film of oil on everything, which is why I then hand wash to get rid of that before it goes in the dishwasher. And I just use a standard routine for the dishwasher, standard wash, because I don't think there is a particular wash for soap makers. So literally every utensil that I've used here gets the same treatment. So wipe off as much excess as possible, and then a really hot hand wash with normal wash on liquid, and then a proper dishwasher cycle. And I don't mean a cool eco cycle either, a proper 60-degree wash. And because I'm using mostly plastics and glass, so it shouldn't be a problem with anything else. If you're using stainless steel metals, make sure it's stainless steel to start with, and make sure you clean it off quite soon after doing your soaping. With this beastie, I get the most of it off like that. On the inside of the blend, turn it off. Obviously I'm never going to be able to get everything off of here, so once I've washed everything else I will stick that in the water and with the water until this is clean. And this one doesn't get used for food, because I know there are lots of nooks and things in there that I can't get into when just generally washing. Okay, so my coffee soap has sat for about 24 hours. It's still a little soft. I took the loaf out of the mould 2-3 hours ago. It was rather wet. It's still drying off, but it doesn't seem to have affected very much, except for the ground coffee on the top is quite damp. Now, having done my research on a coffee soap before I started that one, for once, I know that adding coffee to soap can cause some changes in the normal reaction, can slow down the saponification and the curing, and also cause it to have a strange smell. So far I don't have a strange smell on here, but having the liquid around the outside of a soap that's normally set and ready to go in 24 hours is slightly alarming. I wouldn't call it excessively, although I am gloving up for probably the first time in this series of soap making. You are supposed to be gloved up constantly, but I normally can't be bothered, really. It's a bad attitude to have, but that's it, how it is. So I'm going to first unmould my little wee ones here. These are coming away from the mould quite easily. That one was a little sticky. So okay, I can only see 3 layers of colour. Well, no, there is a fourth, but I think maybe that blended in a little bit. So I've also got these little bits and pieces of drops of soap, which I will put into my little pot of odds for November soap. I've probably mentioned that before, so I won't mention much more of it this time. Again, that second layer is there, but it's very faint. I think I maybe should have kept with just the one shade of brown and just gone up with the kaolin instead. Trying to kind of blend in 2 shades of brown. It doesn't seem to have worked as well as I'd like. So, cutting mill off. I think I'm going to go for a we call it waffle cut. I don't know. So I'm not actually going to use the little bar here because I find that kind of gets in the way and you end up with the soap trapped in between. So let's turn this over. It's still a touch soft on the corners. A little slippery. So because I'm doing a waffle cut, my first one is going to be about half thickness. So I've got a usable cut out at the end which will stay home as a house soap. Won't be given away because it'll only have one side with the waffle on. So my cutter here has got 2 different widths of cutting space. So obviously the thinner one is for the straight blade and obviously this one needs a wider channel. So straight down. Actually want to move that into the middle of the tray. Right. Ooh, there we go. Okay, so I'll show you the end piece here. I don't know if that's going to come out on camera, but I do have 4 clear lines of brown, well, different shades of brown. Although the difference between the middle 2 isn't quite as obvious as I'd like. So I think I will be making this again in future, and I will just use a chocolate brown or a coffee brown and just line it through with kaolin, I think. Maybe a bit of TD. Possibly. I haven't used TD in anything so far. But I think if there hadn't been a miscommunication and someone hadn't stolen my frozen latte, this would have come out as a lighter soap because it would have been a proper milk soap. As it is, it's a milk soap recipe without using milk. So, now on to full size cuts. So doing it this way means I end up with, end up with a safety pin stuck in the bottom of my soap. I'm not entirely sure where that came from. It's going to cause some problems. Right, so yeah, doing this way with the kind of half cut at the end means I get 11, no I don't, I get 9 cuts out of this loaf, which is okay, albeit 2 of those aren't really giftable as such. So I'm cutting at about 3 centimetres, so just over an inch. If I cut to an inch I would get close to 10 or 11. I think this is a nice size. It's cutting really quite cleanly. I'm not having, I'm not getting a lot of splurge build up on the blade, which you tend to get if they are too soft. So like I say, it is a little slimy still, but it's cutting cleanly. I'm not getting the little residue at the top of the cut line, so that's good. It might end up being a little close together. Other than that, I'm quite happy with this one, and as this one's coming out in September, when I'm starting school training, teacher training, so I think the mug of coffee kind of idea is good for a back to school themed soap. because although I don't drink coffee normally, I do when I'm at school. So I think that's appropriate. I'm getting a decent amount of actual coffee scent off of this. I was concerned that it would not have the proper coffee smell to it, because actually putting coffee in the mix can cause it to have a strange odour. It doesn't seem to have happened here. So all in all, I'm really quite happy with this. And considering last month the O Canada one was well, not a complete failure, but at least a failure in some regard, I'm quite happy that this has been, although slightly more involved than my other soaps, it hasn't been a complete failure. So whatever jinx or curse I had over me for August, I think it's cleared. So I'm going to keep cutting these, and I'll see you again next week.